Creatine monohydrate, the most studied form of creatine in sports science history. First isolated in 1832 by French chemist Michel-Eugène Chevreul. From skeletal muscle tissue, creatine monohydrate became commercially available to athletes in the early 1990s following the 1992 Barcelona Olympics, where several medalists reportedly used it. It consists of creatine bound to a single water molecule, making it approximately 88% pure creatine by weight. Over 700 peer-reviewed studies support its efficacy. It increases phosphocreatine stores in muscle, accelerating ATP regeneration during high-intensity efforts. Unflavored, slightly gritty in texture, and famously difficult to dissolve completely in cold water. Creatine hydrochloride. Developed in the early 2000s as a more soluble alternative to monohydrate. Creatine hydrochloride bonds creatine to a hydrochloride group, dramatically lowering the pH of the compound. This makes it roughly 38 times more water-soluble than creatine monohydrate, according to a 2010 study published in the Journal of Dietary Supplements. Because of this enhanced absorption, effective doses are often marketed at 750 milligrams compared to the standard 3 to 5 grams of monohydrate. It was developed primarily for users who experience bloating or gastrointestinal discomfort. The taste is sharper and slightly acidic. However, direct head-to-head performance comparisons with monohydrate remain limited in the literature. Buffered creatine. Sold predominantly under the brand name Kre-Alkalyn, buffered creatine was patented in 1998 by Jeff Golini. The concept involves raising the pH of creatine monohydrate to between 7 and 14 using alkaline powder, theoretically preventing its conversion to creatinine, a waste byproduct in the stomach's acidic environment. Manufacturers claim this allows lower doses, typically 1.5 to 2.5 grams, to match the effectiveness of standard 5-gram monohydrate doses. A 2012 study in the Journal of the International Society of Sports Nutrition found no significant performance difference between Kre-Alkalyn and monohydrate at equivalent doses. The powder is fine-grained, neutral in flavor, and dissolves easily. Creatine ethyl ester. Introduced in the early 2000s, creatine ethyl ester was designed by attaching an ethyl group to creatine via an ester bond, a process borrowed from pharmaceutical chemistry to enhance cellular membrane permeability. Proponents argued that the fat-soluble ester coating would allow faster and more complete absorption than monohydrate without requiring a loading phase. However, a landmark 2009 study from the University of Waterloo demonstrated that creatine ethyl ester actually converts to creatinine significantly faster in the digestive tract than monohydrate, making it less effective gram for gram. Despite this, it remained popular through the mid-2000s bodybuilding community. It carries a noticeably bitter, chemically sharp aftertaste. Micronized creatine. Micronized creatine is not a chemically distinct compound, but rather creatine monohydrate that has been mechanically processed into particles roughly 20 times smaller than standard monohydrate crystals. Developed as a practical solution to monohydrate's notorious poor solubility, the micronization process increases the total surface area of each gram of creatine, allowing it to mix more completely in liquid and absorb more uniformly in the gastrointestinal tract. The result is a dramatically smoother texture with virtually no gritty residue. First widely commercialized in the late 1990s, it became the dominant form of monohydrate sold in supplement retail by the early 2010s. Performance outcomes remain identical to standard monohydrate. Creatine magnesium chelate. Developed and patented under the trade name Creatine Magna Power by Albion Minerals, creatine magnesium chelate bonds, creatine directly to magnesium rather than water. This dual compound approach was designed to simultaneously deliver creatine for ATP support and magnesium for muscle contraction and enzymatic function. A 2004 study published in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research found comparable strength gains to creatine monohydrate in resistance-trained subjects. Because magnesium is required for the conversion of creatine to phosphocreatine within muscle cells. The theory behind this compound has genuine biochemical logic. It contains approximately 6.5% magnesium by weight and is smoother and less gritty than standard monohydrate. Tricreatine malate. Formed by bonding 3 creatine molecules to 1 molecule of malic acid, tricreatine malate emerged in European sports supplement markets in the early 2000s. Malic acid is a naturally occurring compound found in apples and is involved in the Krebs cycle, the cellular energy pathway that produces ATP aerobically. Supplement manufacturers marketed this combination as providing dual energy pathway support, both anaerobic through creatine and aerobic through malate. It dissolves significantly better in water than monohydrate and carries a mild tartness due to the malic acid component. Independent clinical studies are sparse, and most supporting evidence is extrapolated from creatine monohydrate research. Popular in European powerlifting circles through the 2000s. Creatine nitrate. Creatine nitrate bonds creatine to a nitrate group, a compound also found in beetroot extract and widely researched for its ability to increase nitric oxide production, which dilates blood vessels and improves muscular oxygen delivery. First commercialized in the early 2000s by supplement brand Concret, creatine nitrate was positioned as combining the strength benefits of creatine with the pump and endurance benefits of nitrates. A 2012 study published in the Journal of the International Society of Sports Nutrition confirmed it was safe and well tolerated, though comprehensive performance data versus monohydrate is still developing. It dissolves exceptionally well in water, has a slightly salty mineral flavor, and is approximately 3 times more water soluble than monohydrate. Creatine pyruvate. Created by bonding creatine to pyruvic acid, a naturally occurring molecule at the endpoint of glycolysis and the gateway to the Krebs cycle, creatine pyruvate was introduced in the early 2000s with the premise of enhancing both anaerobic and aerobic energy simultaneously. It contains approximately 60% creatine by molecular weight compared to monohydrate's 88%, meaning larger doses are required for equivalent creatine delivery. A 2011 study in the Journal of the International Society of Sports Nutrition found that creatine pyruvate produced higher plasma creatine levels than citrate forms, but did not demonstrate superior muscular performance outcomes. It has a distinctly tart and acidic flavor profile and dissolves well in water. Liquid creatine. Liquid creatine products surged in popularity during the late 1990s and early 2000s, marketed as pre-dissolved and instantly bioavailable. The central scientific problem with this form is chemical stability. Multiple studies, including research published by the American College of Sports Medicine, confirmed that creatine dissolved in liquid begins converting to creatinine within days of mixing, particularly when exposed to acidic environments. By the time most liquid creatine products reached the consumer, measurable creatine content had degraded substantially below label claims. The Federal Trade Commission took action against several manufacturers in the early 2000s for misleading marketing. Largely abandoned by the scientific community and serious athletes, liquid creatine remains a cautionary example in supplement industry history. Creatine alpha ketoglutarate. Creatine alpha-ketoglutarate bonds creatine to alpha-ketogluteric acid, a compound involved in the citric acid cycle and also a precursor to glutamine synthesis in muscle tissue. Popularized in the mid-2000s alongside arginine, AKG, and pre-workout formulations, it was theorized to enhance creatine transport into muscle cells while simultaneously supporting nitrogen balance and recovery. The compound was frequently included in proprietary blends, making independent dosing analysis difficult. Solubility is notably higher than monohydrate, and the texture is finer. Peer-reviewed evidence specific to this compound is minimal, and most efficacy assumptions are borrowed from monohydrate data. It was most prominent between 2005 and 2012 before simpler, better-studied forms reclaimed dominance in the market. Creatine gluconate. Creatine gluconate attaches creatine to gluconic acid, a compound derived from glucose oxidation, with the intention of using glucose as a natural transport mechanism into muscle cells. The underlying logic draws from well-established research showing that insulin spikes, typically triggered by simple carbohydrates, dramatically increase creatine uptake into skeletal muscle by upregulating creatine transporters. By chemically bonding creatine directly to a glucose derivative, manufacturers sought to replicate this insulin mediated transport effect without requiring a separate carbohydrate source. It was introduced in the mid 2000s and carries a mildly sweet taste compared to other creatine forms. Controlled clinical evidence is limited, but theoretical absorption mechanisms remain biochemically plausible and discussed in sports nutrition literature. Creatine citrate. Creatine citrate combines creatine with citric acid, the organic acid found in citrus fruits and a key intermediate in the Krebs cycle. Originally developed to improve upon monohydrate's solubility challenges, creatine citrate dissolves approximately 5 times more readily in water. However, because the citrate molecule contributes significant mass to the compound, the actual creatine content per gram is only around 40%, roughly half that of monohydrate. This means achieving a standard 3-gram creatine dose require approximately 7.5 grams of creatine citrate. First popularized in the late 1990s, it was one of the earliest commercial alternatives to monohydrate. The flavor is mildly sour, and it mixes cleanly into liquid, making it a common choice in flavored, ready-to-mix formulations. Creatine monohydrate remains the most validated choice for most people. Decades of research, low cost, and proven results make it the default recommendation from sports scientists worldwide. If digestion is a concern, micronized creatine solves the solubility problem without changing the underlying compound. For those seeking additional functional benefits, creatine magnesium chelate offers a biochemically logical dual nutrient approach. Regardless of form, consistent daily intake of 3 to 5 grams is what the evidence consistently supports. The supplement industry will always produce newer, more expensive variations, but the science keeps pointing back to the same white powder Chevreul first identified from muscle tissue nearly 200 years ago.